All right, I have 2 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ariana Lennon, and I will be the moderator for the session. Before we begin, I have a few reminders for you. We do have a code of conduct that we will be adhering to for this conference. I'm posting the link in chat now. If you experience any issues related to conduct, please contact us via email, genainlibraries@gmail.com. Please be sure to make sure your microphone is muted. During the Q&A, please wait until you are invited to unmute before asking your questions or making your comments. You may also use chat throughout the entire webinar for your questions, and I'll be keeping track of those. This session is being recorded, and you can enable captions by clicking on Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. Today's presenter is Jason Coleman from Kansas State Library, Hale Library. And today's session is How to Augment Retrieval Augmented Generation. Please join me in welcoming Jason.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here today. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, hopefully you all can see the PowerPoint. Oh, good, thank you. So the title of my talk is How to Augment Retrieval Augmented Generation. Before I jump into that, I'm going to just give you a brief background to explain why I came to this presentation. So many years ago, 1998, in fact, I started my library career as a reference generalist here. And I loved that job. It didn't pay very well at all, but I got to sit at a reference desk that was very busy and answer questions all day long. It was fabulous. And what I did is anytime anybody left the desk, I would just dive in and see, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Where else could I have gone to find good resources? And I also became really interested in search techniques and tips and tricks and operators and wildcards. And as I did this more and more, I became really convinced that it's vital for us to understand what we're searching and in particular, how exactly the searching is being processed. Very recently, in the beginning of 2023, I, like many of you, heard about ChatGPT and started jumping in and seeing what happens. In my first experience, I was blown away. How in the world is this possible? How can it be so articulate and accurate about some things? There's been a great deal of hype and explosion. As I think many of you know, there are about 7 core foundation models, maybe a few more than that, the ones that take a lot of money to train up. And then tons and tons and tons of people, thousands, creating products around those foundation models. Wrappers is a term that I've heard a lot of people use. Some of those wrappers are tools that can be used for discovery. And as you all know now, the main foundation models have an entree to do that too, such as ChatGPT 4.0 and Gemini. But as we are doing this, myself and others, are very dismayed about hallucinations, which are also called confabulations, is information that's made up. And that constrains the ability of them to be reliable assistants. Interesting tools such as Perplexity, Elicit, and SciSpace, and there's many others in this category, have emerged. And that is something that I just became fascinated by delving into those. So at the moment, brief snapshot, we have a lot of the traditional database companies creating generative AI adjuncts to their traditional databases, such as Scopus AI, Clarivate's in the process of creating one. JSTOR has demoed one. I'm sure there are many other companies that are doing this. Multimodality is a real hit right now. That's what ChatGPT 4.0 is all about. So multimodality means that you can basically go from image to text, text to image, image to video in some cases, image to sound, and you can just translate amongst all of these different formats sort of seamlessly. Recently, you probably heard the announcements from Microsoft about how they are placing AI on devices. So the new iPhones will be very AI enhanced. There's AI PCs coming out. Meta has classes. So this is a trend as well. Within this whirlwind, there are enormous number of myths and misconceptions and mistakes people are making, including myself. It's impossible not to do that, I think. And crucially, it's not just us, as you know. Faculty are steeped in concern, fear of missing out, and curiosity as well. They are wondering, at least the ones I've been talking to, what will our students need to know? So how can I make sure that I'm being a good instructor and mentor by introducing them to what these tools are? Can AI help me save time? And can it help me be more innovative? So this is a lot of text. I apologize for that, but this happened to me not too long ago. A professor in a department that I liaised to, I had done a presentation to the entire department and introduced a little bit about AI. And then that professor sent me an email, and this is part of it. He said, the general idea is that the co-authors can pick their favorite areas of interest. We would then AI generate content for those topics and have the co-authors vet the content whilst documenting what was working, if anything, and where the challenges may have been. We would then compile the revised content and streamline it into a review, which the co-authors would review again. Once we all agree, we would send the review and its prefacing commentary to the journal, whose editor would already have expressed interest in this project. So more background, this individual had done a comprehensive review in his field back in the late 1990s and wanted to update it and was really intrigued to see what AI could do, and reached out to me to see if I could consult and be a participant in this project. And I was very happy to do it, but that meant that, man, I need to really up my game and learn what's going on. So I wanted to understand how retrieval augmented generation systems work. I'll be explaining more about this throughout the talk. Learn how to use that knowledge to improve searches and learn how to share that knowledge with others. And I still am embarking on this. As a caveat, I don't pretend to be an expert about this. I've used tons of tools with lots and lots of questions and read many articles, but there's so much to know, and I'm not a data scientist, machine learning expert at all. So that is, I'll try to not say things like definitively, like this is the way it is, because honestly, I don't know. A lot of times nobody knows, which is a really interesting state of affairs. So I want us to try to use Menti, and let me pop over to the web here. Sorry about this, got to put this in view. So I don't know if any of you have used Mentimeter, but I created a couple of interactions for us. Really want to know where you as an audience are. And I think you probably are curious about where each other is as well. So the way this works is you can go to menti.com. You can do this on your phone. You can do this on your computer. And then you have to enter the code 48869515. Menti.com 48869515. And the first question is, which of these multimodal chatbots have you used? As I mentioned, multimodality is the idea that you can upload a picture into ChatGPT, for instance, and ask it questions about the picture, like what's in this picture. I did that yesterday, actually. Somebody brought me a device and it was an interesting port on it that I didn't know what to call that port. And so I took a picture, uploaded it to ChatGPT on my phone and said, what are the ports here? And it gave me the information about the ports and even guessed what the device was that I was pointing at, which was absolutely a correct guess. And you can ask it to generate pictures that are similar to a picture, generate text to describe the picture. It's just really fascinating. Okay, so we've got a lot of responses here. I think I set it up so that you can pick more than one if you want to, but see that 25 of you have responded. I'm not going to take too much longer to get the responses, but this isn't too surprising to me that ChatGPT is the most popular here amongst these very popular models. Okay. Another question, which of these retrieval augmented generation tools have you used? Perplexity, Elicit, SciSpace, Cite, Brave, and Undermine. And there are many more, but these are ones that I have played around with. Actually, I haven't played around with Brave that much. But Brave, what's really interesting about them is that it's a browser, and they're promising a lot of data security and privacy. They're very adamant about that. That's their whole marketing play. That's the niche they want to fill. So if people are concerned at your library or the people you're talking to about the security of this and people stealing their data and using their information to train models, Brave would be a good place to direct them to. Okay, Perplexity and Elicit, I'm not surprised, are the leaders here. Undermine, none of you have used that, so there you go. There's the, if nothing else, remember Undermine. It's actually the coolest thing ever. And if we have time, I might demonstrate it. All right. So I have a question here now, and that is I want to gauge your perception of your knowledge of these three issues. How an LLM works. So you have to strongly disagree or strongly agree or in between with how I know how an LLM works. I am good at prompt engineering. I can explain what retrieval augmented generation is and means. I actually wish it would give me a raw count. Oh, there we go. That's interesting. I don't know if you guys can see these charts when I hover over the average. But okay. Okay, good. Wow. Pretty knowledgeable group. Good. Well, I hope that everything I'm going to say isn't already something that you know. And if it is, I apologize. And I ask you to actually tell me what you know as well. Actually, I love that when people share their knowledge too in chat. That'd be great. Okay, let me pop out of my Menti for a bit, and I'm going to advance ahead of these. So what is retrieval augmented generation? Many of you I know this, but I'm going to quickly illustrate with an example. So Perplexity is one of the tools I like a lot. I subscribe to it, $20 a month, which is what everybody charges almost. And this is what the home screen looks like. Crucially about Perplexity is that you can click on focus and you can narrow the range of what information it's looking at. You'll notice academic is a set of academic papers and primarily a semantic scholars corpus of 30 million. I see different figures all over the place. A lot of it's mostly science, STEM content, computer science, but they do have other types of content there too. Reddit, YouTube, and Wolfram Alpha you can focus in on too. So here's an example. I use it for all sorts of things. Actually, I don't use Google anymore. Google's making me mad. I used to be a huge fan. I have a pen that lights up and shines and does all sorts of cool things. I love Google, but lately their results are just really annoying me. So Perplexity, I much appreciate their results. So I asked, said I like Slido and Mentimeter and Pull Everywhere. What are some alternatives like that? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of each? That was my prompt. Perplexity processes that in ways that are mysterious. And you'll notice that it turned it into a number of individual searches. which you don't see any interesting Boolean logic here or wildcards or proximity operators, which I've always, that's what I was like, what is going on here? This doesn't seem very sophisticated. Can we actually influence this and make this more sophisticated is kind of my fundamental question. So it takes those queries, and I'll talk more a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes in a second, and it then retrieves a number of sources from searching an index of the web. It uses Bing's index and all other sources as well. And it found 19 sources. Actually, it found a lot more than that. These are actually just the sources that the algorithm deemed to be the best or the most relevant. And so you can actually see what the sources are, and you can go to them, click on them, they're real sources. Then it uses that information to generate an answer to my query. And this is just the first part of that. And I've put the link, actually I'll share a link to the PowerPoint in the chat a little bit later. But like many of these tools, you can actually share now, generate a link to share your chat and the transcript with anyone. So gave me a lot of good suggestions, things that I had never heard of before. Okay, so I have been on a hunt to figure out what's going on behind the scenes, particularly so we can know if we can intercede and control and modify, like we all learned to do with Google, where we can do all these cool operators like in URL and cite, and we can do around operators, which don't really work anymore, and quotation marks. You guys all know this. It's a lot of fun. I love it. But can we do anything comparable to influence how Perplexity is working behind the scenes and improve our prompts? So this is a chart that gives a very broad overview. And as I mentioned, you ask a question, there's something within the system that does a smart search and looks at a corpus of data. This shows private knowledge base, but it doesn't have to be private. Many of them are also searching open source, open index of the web. But companies really like this because they can expose all the documentation to these systems and enable their employees to really learn policies better. I keep waiting for us to do this here in the library, but because we have a huge internet and there's stuff all over it which contradicts each other and augments one another, and the search function is terrible. So I really want to expose it to AI, but people are anxious about that. Then the system retrieves relevant documents, and they basically append that information to my initial question. An LLM then generates an answer, which we saw with Perplexity, and that's how it works. So actually, before we go on, I have a quick question that I really want to ask of you, where the heck did that go? I got to get back to where my Mentimeter was. There we go. So you saw that, you saw the figure of what was being used to represent the LLM. And my question for you is, what kind of bird was that, and why was it chosen? Ah, yay. Okay, yes. 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 Okay. Yes, it's a parrot. And because there's a famous article about stochastic parrots by a linguist about what these tools are doing, which, you know, I think things have changed since then. There's a little bit of truth to that, but they actually do a lot more now than what they used to do. Okay, thank you for indulging me on Menti. I kind of go overboard on it occasionally, but let me get back to the slide presentation. And okay. So I have a lot of questions about various aspects of this process, and I've been trying to figure out what's going on. And what I'm going to do now is delve into that in more detail, as my description of the session promised that I would. Okay, so question number one, how is a question translated into a search? And there are a couple of ways that it's being done. Some of it is the traditional method. It takes our query and it appends it, it augments it by, actually this isn't totally traditional, but it accesses the semantic web to get additional terms that are related to the terms that we put in. It automatically creates an elaborate query, such as you can see here. And this was from a talk at Aluna by somebody who works for Ex Libris, talking about their upcoming Primo Research Assistant. And this is an example of how that query might be processed. What is the effect of vitamin D efficiency? And this is behind the scenes what the LLM might create and then send to the database. So it's a really elaborate query, which is something that we're familiar with. What's new now with these LLMs is that many of them are also using a secondary method, which is to convert the query into a dense vector representation using embeddings. Hey, that makes it sound like I'm smart and know about machine learning, which I know a little bit, but those are still sort of mysterious words to me. The essence is, as far as I understand, that it takes the actual words and then it translates them into embeddings to create vectors, and you see a little illustration of that. And then these vectors exist in multidimensional space. And my brain just blows up when I start to try to think about this multidimensional space. And this image intrigues me mostly because of up at the top right, we have 300 dimensions being illustrated here, and that can be many more dimensions, but trying to perceive what 300 dimensions would look like is bizarre to me. But essentially in semantic space, our documents and our queries are being represented as vectors. I see that Douglas, you've raised your hand. Ariana, can you go ahead and enable Douglas to ask a question?
Sure thing. Let me pull him up. Oh no.
You go to the participants list, you should be able to give them the permission to activate, to ask a question.
Is he here?
My apologies. If I'm the Douglas in question, it was inadvertent.
Okay.
Please press on. Sorry.
Okay, no worries, no worries. So a little bit more about this. This method, the semantic processing, neural retrieval is a phrase that is often used here, is augmented in several ways, which is really interesting to me, that they'll take your query and the system will do a lot of elaboration and processing of it behind the scenes. One of the ways could be that they have the LLM generate a potential hypothetical answer to your question and then use that answer to then query the LLM again or the database set. Multi-query generation we've talked about a little bit. They'll take your query and come up with a lot of different variant ways to describe it and use all of those to search the data set. Synonym and contextual expansion, I think we're all kind of familiar with that, the synonym part. The contextual expansion can come from what you've done previously in that chat session, or in the case of ChatGPT 4.0 and other systems, you can now invoke long-term memory and it can begin to learn about you and use that as part of the context. Pseudo-relevance feedback is knowing associations between words that just tend to co-occur in documents. In knowledge-based expansion, so like a knowledge graph or accessing a proprietary set of documents, for instance. And there's other methods too. Another question, what is searched? So the traditional way that this has worked is you're doing lexical search, you're matching characters together, you're finding words that appear in a document or in a metadata field. With the vector search, it's beyond me, honestly. The primitive way that I've seen it described is that they're looking for vectors that are close in orientation to one another. And there's many models for calculating that closeness. One of the most popular is cosine. So they're looking for nearest neighbors in the vector space and saying that this document is very close in semantic space to the query that you entered, which, it still boggles my mind. The types of things that are being searched vary a lot from system to system. Many of them have access to the internet. Many of them have access to Semantic Scholars corpus of information, as well as OpenAlex and other repositories of open data about articles. Local databases in some cases, and in many of these tools will let you upload documents, and then you can ask questions about those and ask it to use those documents to help inform the answers. What is retrieved? What's being pulled from these sources? It varies a lot. And in some cases, some of the tools aren't very transparent about what they're doing. But full abstracts is what a lot of them are doing, like Elicit and SciSpace, for articles at least. Metadata is being used by these systems, and chunks of documents. So they tend to take the long documents and divide them up into chunks, and then they will retrieve sort of a separate chunk to the system. And I have a lot of comments about that, but that's what's happening. And here's another illustration of the reg process. And what I want you to focus on here is the prompt box. So this retriever has retrieved a bunch of things by doing the search processes, and it then takes these chunks that it's retrieved, as well as context, and it appends that or augments the question that you asked with all this information that it found, sends that to the LLM, and this time it's not a bird, it's a cat, and it gives you the answer. So how exactly that appending happens, I'm not really sure. Okay, I wanted to just check in and see how people are feeling about how I'm processing or how this is going. And I probably do not have up what I need to have. Okay. Well, that's okay. Oh, I'm getting a thumbs up. All right. Sorry, that Momentometer fail here. I have too many windows open on too many different screens. It's a bit of a problem. So, okay. So what else is there to know about reg systems and how they work? There's a lot. I don't know it all. I think what I'm telling you is true, or mostly true. So a lot of these systems have behind the scenes prompts that are guiding and governing the way they respond to you. I found a thread on Reddit that said that they had been able to get Perplexity to divulge its system prompt, which I don't know if this is the actual one or not, but it looks like it kind of could be. But this is exemplary of the types of things that you will see. So telling it how to respond. And you'll notice this is not like a program. It's not a decision tree. This is all natural language because Perplexity sends things to an LLM. They use ChatGPT, they use others, a variety of LLMs actually. So that's another important consideration. Many function better if you ask fully natural language questions. So include your prepositions, include your articles, rather than typing out a number of keywords. They can be stingy in retrieval, which I'm sure many of you have seen. You want a lot of sources and you just get a couple initially. Fortunately, many of them will enable you to ask follow-up questions, and it will remember the context of what has been asked previously, so you can gradually build up, just like you would be talking with a person. Well, it's not just like that, but analogous to that. They also, some of them provide menus to filter results. Cite is really good at that. SciSpace has a little bit, and Undermine too. and there's others, that will let you do a little bit of metadata filtering. Crucially, it's important to know that they make mistakes, even though the idea is that these will help reduce hallucinations and give access to really current information. They still can hallucinate even after they pull in excerpts of knowledge from documents. And when they cite where they got their information from, those citations pretty much always appear at the end of a sentence, maybe an end of a paragraph. And it's not clear which parts of that paragraph are attributed to which source, which is annoying. Okay, I'm going to skip that Menti. So how do we prompt these using all of the knowledge, using what I've very quickly went over? A lot of the best practices for prompting these tools come from the fact that we are communicating with an LLM fundamentally to get our answers. And so the key things are that you need to, sort of know what happens when you communicate with an LLM. And the way I characterize it to myself is I remind myself I'm talking to, it's easy to anthropomorphize, and I apologize for doing that, but it makes it easier to talk about them. Talking to an assistant who is very willing, very eager, has infinite energy, will answer any kind of stupid questions that I come up with, but has a bad job of, can't really make assumptions about what I might be trying to get at. Can't do that very much because it's not a person, so it doesn't understand all the thoughts that people tend to have, which lead them to the questions that they ask. So we have to be very clear, very explicit. Be on your lookout for assumptions that underlie what you're typing. And as librarians, we're good at that. We're good at finding assumptions and what needs to be articulated better. So we are pretty good at prompting in general, I think. We have to use domain-specific terminology. It's really, really vital to do that, partly because they're still doing lexical searching in many cases, but also because when semantically processed, if you use a broad term, you're going to be getting in a bunch of junk that's not really that relevant. It's a give and take. If you don't get much that's good, go ahead and try broader terms. So eliminate ambiguity. Use a series of prompts rather than one long prompt is something that I found to be helpful. So I like to build it up over time by asking different aspects of what I'm looking for and gradually adding more and more to the question, like a number of patrons will do to us, right? They ask sort of vaguely what they want, and then they'll reveal, oh, by the way, I want this information all to be only from the 19th century or whatever. And that's how communicating with them this way I've found to be somewhat effective, because it will cause more searching to happen, and it will find more sources. It will build up its own context window. As you know, with prompting LLMs, it's helpful to add context, such as who you are, what you're trying to do, and to give clear instructions as well. So what kind of format do you want? What kind of tone do you want? Some of the tools don't let you do this, like SciSpace and Elicit. I don't think they are really going to respond well to these kinds of instructions and context. They just want you to put in the question. But tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT, of course, will accommodate this. I'm almost done with this sort of like fire hose of information. I apologize for it. Part, and I want to leave a little bit of time for us to talk and need to answer some questions. Okay, good. So we can instruct the system to generate, we can ask it explicitly, generate several variations of the question that we've typed in. And then we can say, okay, combine all of those answers you gave me, or combine all those variations of my question to make one super question, and then give me the answer to that really good question. And I have an example here where I did that with Perplexity to some effect. You can ask system to critique your question. That's one of the best ways to use LLMs, is to ask it to critique your thoughts, your feedback, your initial draft, and tell you what's missing or what it would recommend to add back into it. And we can do that with the queries we write. Try asking the system to only use sources that have specific words in the title. And because I kept trying, like, what if my traditional technique and toolkit that I have built up over the years still applies to these systems? And the answer is not a lot. I can't figure out how to make do proximity searching or elaborate Boolean operators embedded in parentheses. But I was able to get Perplexity to give me sources that only had a particular word in the title, which is one of my favorite mechanisms for narrowing searches that are too broad. So that's intriguing. You can try to tell the system to use only specific types of websites, like only use government sites or educational sites. Or you can tell it to use only a specific site. And again, this depends on which system you're using. Perplexity, ChatGPT can do this. I don't believe that SciSpace and Elicit and others of that nature will accommodate this. And crucially, if you want more results, tell the system that. Tell your very happy assistant to go get you some more results. I always worry about the things I ask these systems, like, oh man, that's asking a lot. If I was asking that of a person, they would, like, I don't know, run away or be very angry with me. But these are machines, and they're very happy to try to comply. I'm going to run really quickly through some of my favorite tools. I'm not going to say much about them, just give you a quick glimpse of what they look like, and you can delve into them later. And like I said, I will share the URL to my slides here in a second. This is Perplexity. We already talked about that. This is SciSpace's opening screen. And they just want you to ask a question. This is Elicit, very similar, very clean screen. Both of those are leveraging primarily Semantic Scholar's set of databases, also PubMed too, which is included within Semantic Scholar. This is Undermine's interface, and I would encourage you all to go to undermine.ai, not right now, after the talk, and try this. It's really interesting. They are taking more time, so that this is not for those people who want an instantaneous answer. It will build up the search over time. It will explain to you what it's doing, and allow you to ask for more. It actually asks you for a lot of information initially before it will even search. So I like that a lot. This is Cite, which has a unique feature that the people who created this came up with a database of billions of citation statements. So they looked in papers and they, like, how was this article being cited? What was being said about it? So they excerpted, like, sentences around the actual in-text citation, and then they classified them as being supportive, contradictory, or just neutral. And that opens up some very interesting possibilities. Suggested resources, Aaron Tay is amazing. I really like what he's writing, and he gets into a lot of depth and detail about AI and searching. Search Engine Land, this is a SEO trade publication, but they talk a lot about understanding how these tools are actually using, so that people who create content can create it effectively, so that these tools will highlight it and find it and show it to potential customers. An interesting question for all of us is, do these tools have implications for how people should write and structure their journal articles and their books, so that when people use Perplexity or SciSpace, their results are going to be found in this multidimensional vector space? There's probably research that's coming out about that, but I haven't delved into it yet. By the way, delve is a clear sign or an indicator that somebody is using AI in their writing. It's like one of the biggest signals, but it doesn't, of course, mean that they've done that. They might just love that word like I do. Medium is also a great place for a lot of information about this. And OpenAI's community site for developers has a lot of good stuff. Okay, so wow, did I have any time for questions? I think I did, like five minutes. So you could ask questions about these discussion questions I put up, or other questions you have. And I turn it over to you, Iriana, if you could let me know what people want to know.
Yes, let's get started with our first question in the Q&A. I think Kelly Herm also has a couple more questions that are in chat, and I'll follow up with them. Her first question is, how are the first models you mentioned, Gemini, Claude, MS Copilot, different from the second group, Perplexity, and cite?
Just a second, I'm putting there's the URL to my slides.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's a really good question. And the some of those systems they haven't been trained specifically on academic materials, so they aren't really processing queries in the same way. The elaboration mechanisms that are used in SciSpace and Elicit will elaborate using more technical language and pulling from a corpus of information that they extracted from scientific articles. I think that's one of the main differences, even though I think there's ways to get around that with clever prompting in those tools. ChatGPT, I haven't yet been able to, I haven't tried that hard actually, but to get it to just focus on academic articles, and I don't even know if it does. I haven't found out if it can yet, or Gemini, but they certainly do retrieval augmented generation, even though it's hard to make ChatGPT do that. Sometimes it just accesses a large language model, which is the predictive stochastic part of it. And so it tends to hallucinate a lot more when it does that. And they are also multimodal, most of them. So you can throw in pictures and ask it about those pictures and ask it to create images for you, those sorts of things.
Awesome. Our next question is, what do these tools mean for our traditional idea of the literature review, both published by professionals and the student deep dive into a topic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is emerging and evolving. It's interesting to me how many faculty I've talked to have been really excited by the idea of not having to spend nearly as much time on literature reviews, so that they can really focus in on doing their research and analyzing the results and describing that. But I think that, well, there's a fundamental problem that I forgot to mention, and that is that these tools right now, they have a difficult time citing the correct information. They will tend to cite a citing source rather than a cited source. So they'll say, Coleman and Lowe said this is information I'm attributing to them. But then if you look at my paper, I've actually cited somebody else in my literature review. And so it's giving improper information about where that idea came from. And I think they're getting better at solving that problem, but it's still a problem. So we will probably see people citing, not citing the original sources, but the secondary sources. But as well, if people are relying on these for systematic reviews, it's problematic because, one, they don't have access to all of the articles. Nobody does, of course, but there's a lot of holes in what they can access. And two, it's very difficult to control exactly how they're processing your queries. So you can't really do what we need to do with systematic reviews and be that elaborate, at least not yet. Though Undermine is potentially, they're trying to fix that. That's sort of what their mission is in some ways. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but it makes it likely that a lot of people are going to do kind of crummier literature reviews. What they should do, what I tell people to do, is to do traditional way, and then use these tools to see if there's other things out there that you may have missed from what you did with your traditional tools. I see that we're out of time. I tend to kind of ramble sometimes. I apologize.
That's totally okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. Do you want to share how participants can reach out to you if you would like to?
Oh, sure. Let me type that in here. Sorry, did I share in the chat the actual? Oh, there we go. I shared it in a different chat. I have too many chats open. Okay, there's the link to my slides. My email is just my last name at ksu.edu, which is Kansas State, not Kennesaw State, not Kentucky State, not Kent State, Kansas State University. So thank you all. I hope you learned something new, and give undermine.ai a try. That's a tool that I really want them to survive. And yes, you have to pay them money if you want to use them a lot, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do it.
All right, thank you so much, Jason. Thank you to everyone who attended this session. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Gale conference. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you all.